for joining me today and welcome to my sewing room. We have two really fabulous techniques to share with you today. The first is called shadow diamonds. Shadow diamonds are really an old technique because the first time I ever saw them was on an antique petticoat. As you can see with my hand run under the collar of this beautiful blouse, you can see peekaboo organdy through the batiste. The sleeve on this blouse is really beautiful also, with its shadow diamonds running up and down the sleeve, and a little machine embroidery bow is in the center of the sleeve. The next shadow diamond blouse I have to share with you is a square collar blouse with smaller shadow diamonds with the entre-deux stitch stitched all the way around the shadow diamonds. They are on the front of the collar of this beautiful square collared blouse. They are also on the back. Entre-deux stitch stitched around the little organdy diamonds. This lovely christening dress, baptismal gown, blessing dress, or baby dedication dress has the princess lines, and the shadow diamonds are right here on the skirt of the dress. Can you see that, the way I have it turned? Do you see this flower right here? That's the that's the Australian Windowpane. I'm sorry. This is more Australian Windowpane on this lovely blouse. This Australian Windowpane is on the pocket of the blouse, almost a fleur-de-lis design. This lovely hostess apron has more Australian Windowpane all over the front of this lovely batiste apron. You can peekaboo and see right through the organdy. A perfectly beautiful design for a hostess apron. This lovely little pink dress has Australian Windowpane up in the top of the bodice of the dress, and then as I travel down the dress, I find Australian Windowpane in several different places. First of all, I have Australian Windowpane right here in this loop of lace. Then as I move to the side, I have more Australian Windowpane techniques on this lovely little pink dress. Actually, both Australian Windowpane and shadow diamonds are very easy to make. Let's go over to the technique boards and I will share with you exactly how this is done. The first technique is Australian Windowpane. Actually, I use a piece of organdy, and later on the batiste is cut away so I can see through, like a window pane, I can see through the organdy. All right, I draw the design onto a piece of organdy. Next, I take the piece of organdy over to my dress, pretend like this base fabric is my dress. I take the piece of organdy with the design on it, put it on top of the base fabric, and zigzag around it, zigzagging around my heart design. The next step is to go in and trim away this organdy piece all the way around it. You see, I don't want any floppy pieces of organdy sticking out on my design, so I trim the organdy away. Next, I'm just going to flip this piece of fabric down. I go behind the garment and trim away the base fabric, in this case the batiste. I trim it away from behind, so now then, I have a peekaboo organdy piece. Over here shows that peekaboo organdy piece. In other words, the fabric is trimmed away from behind it, and I can see through this little heart. The next stitching is simple applique. Zigzag all the way around the heart, and that finishes it. Now, let me show you what it looks like in a pink rather than a navy blue on a white. That isn't too pretty. Here is the finished Australian Windowpane done in pink, and I've put a little monogram right in the middle, but I can see through the organdy part, and this is my batiste base fabric. Okay, so much for Australian Windowpane. The next technique is shadow diamonds, and this is the easiest way to make shadow diamonds. I have one long strip of fabric. This is one long strip of fabric right here. I have a piece of organdy. Let me unpin this to show you. I have a piece of organdy on top. You see the top layer? And then my batiste for my fashion garment is underneath. So I have a piece of organdy on top. I trace the diamond on this piece of organdy like this. Then the next step is to entre-deux wing needle stitch all the way around, you see, all the way around that diamond. And in this case, I once again go to the back. Let me unpin it again. I go to the back and cut away the fashion fabric or the batiste or whatever from the back, and then in this case I have a little machine bow put there. Let me go over and show you these two techniques on one of the prettiest quilt squares that we have for this week. This very interesting quilt square has a heart in the middle of Australian window pane with the peekaboo organdy and a little machine monogram. Actually has a P for Pullen on it. Then I have 4 shadow diamonds in each corner of this pretty pink Swiss batiste square with the white Swiss organdy used as my peekaboo. Here is a little bit different method for making Australian window pane, different but easy also. In this case, I have put a whole piece of organdy behind the quilt square. In other words, the piece of organdy is as large as the quilt square. Then I have traced off the shadow diamonds and then done my wing needle entre-deux stitch all the way around each one of these shadow diamonds. Are you with me on that? In other words, you do the wing needle entre-deux stitch and then cut away the batiste from the top. Next step for the Australian window pane says zigzag all the way around the large heart. In other words, zigzag all the way around this heart, a tiny little zigzag, just enough to hold the heart. Next step, let me go down to the bottom piece. After I have zigzagged all the way around this heart, I have to make it peekaboo, so very carefully I get my scissors and I trim away the batiste portion of the heart. Let me go ahead and finish trimming this away. Okay, very carefully I said now. Okay, here's what I did once again. You see, here was my heart. I zigzagged around it for Australian window pane, and then I trim away the heart. Now, the reason you can't see through this right now is because I have a piece of iron-on stabilizer behind here, okay? Now, I need that because I'm now going to basically applique around this heart. That's what Australian window pane is. So I'm going to come over here, and in this particular case I have my width on 2.5 and my length on a half or a satin stitch or a 0.5. Now I'm going to applique all the way around. I'm going to come down following the heart line. I'm going to come down into the point. Carefully, Martha. Okay. Get to the point, and I'm going to end on the outside. Okay, I'm going to lift my presser foot and turn around and begin to applique. In other words, I did a block point there. I'm going to applique, just zigzagging all the way around the heart. Now this is very easy to do. You know, applique is so much fun. This final stitch finishes up, you know, where I cut away the fabric on the outside. This final zigzagging or appliquing goes ahead and finishes off that raw edge where I had cut it away. And this is all there is to finishing up the Australian window pane, just a final applique that goes all the way around the heart. Now then, I'm not going to sew all the way around this heart. I'm going to stop sewing right now, right as I get into the tip of this heart, and I'm going to stop. Now, I'm going to go over to the boards because I have a couple of really pretty things to show you over here, some dresses and one more technique board. Once again, may I refresh your memory. The shadow diamonds, here we go, we trace it off, and then we have organdy behind it. So this is a shadow diamond strip. I have the sweetest little dress to show you, which has the shadow diamond strip, which comes down the front. Do you see the shadow diamonds, the peekaboo shadow diamonds on this little dress? Guess what I have in the center of each one of those? A little silk ribbon rosebud flower. Now let's come down to the skirt of this dress. Let me hold it out for you. I have a shadow diamond strip also around the skirt of this dress that has the machine entre-deux, and also has, let me pull up the little slip so I can put my hand under here. It has a sweet little lazy daisy silk ribbon embroidery flower right in the center of the shadow diamonds. Now let's go to Australian Windowpane and make this one a little bit different. Look at the top of this pretty little dress. This has an Australian Windowpane motif right here underneath my finger, or on top of my fingers. And instead of being made out of organdy, this one is made with netting. In other words, cotton netting in the little tulip. Here is how you do that. First of all, right over here on the board, this is a piece of netting. In other words, bridal netting, like a just see-through netting. I trace my design off on the netting, and I put it on my collar. Can you see how I've traced the whole collar off on this piece of white fabric? The design is under the netting, and let me show you what else I have put under here. I have put a piece of water-soluble stabilizer underneath the netting, and I'll tell you why in half a second. Let me stick this back up here. Now, step number 2, come over here. Step number 2 is to zigzag all the way around this netting tulip, and you're going to zigzag all the way through the water-soluble stabilizer, and then come in here and cut away the netting. In other words, cut away all of this excess, so I'm left now with just my netting tulip. The last step is to turn it over to the back, the way I showed you on the first board, and trim away all of the excess on the inside. Then you're going to trim away your water-soluble stabilizer too, but trim away the fabric from behind this netting. Now, why did I put this water-soluble stabilizer? So when I came in here to trim away the fabric, I wouldn't be likely to cut that netting. That's why I trimmed it away. And then you turn it over, and there we have our collar after you zigzag. I have a little doll who also has a lovely Australian Windowpane dress, and I'd like for you to meet her next. This dress features a combination bow lace shaping and Australian Windowpane butterflies. The dress is of peach Swiss batiste. The sleeves are made of a Swiss organdy. The sleeves have the sweetest little machine stitching going diagonally out of a peach thread. The skirt, look at that sweet little bow, the little tied bow zigzag down. And here is the Australian Windowpane butterfly with some wonderful little machine decoration inside it. Here is another tiny little Australian Windowpane butterfly over here. And then the little skirt has a scallop skirt. Come on over here and let's see how easy it is to make this little doll dress. First of all, I'm going to trace off the butterfly. Can you see the butterfly traced off on this piece of organdy? Then I will place the organdy on the skirt where it's supposed to be. Also, already placed on here are 2 more little butterflies which are drawn off on organdy. Now they're placed on the skirt. Let's go to the next step. All right, step number 2, right over here. Zigzag around the butterfly, zigzag all the way around it. Then, next step, trim away the excess organdy from the front. In other words, after it's zigzagged, you trim it away. Then I'm going to go to the back and trim away the dress fabric from the back so it will make it peekaboo. I can now see through this organdy. All right, after I have trimmed the front, trimmed the back, I then put a piece of stabilizer behind this. Let me flip it over and show you a piece of just pull away stabilizer. Put the stabilizer behind it and then zigzag all the way around the butterfly and in the center part and then the decoration. Then after that, I go back in the back and of course pull away the tearaway stabilizer. Then I shape my lace bow. You remember we did a lace bow in an earlier show? I shape my lace bow, pull it around, pull the little strings, zigzag all the way around my lace bow as I have done in this orange thread here. And then I shape my lace with a little miter on the bottom of the skirt to make a scallop skirt. Zigzag the top row first, then trim it away where it makes a little scallop skirt. Gather my lace edging right here and zigzag my lace edging to the bottom of the scallop skirt. And there is my little Australian Windowpane doll dress. Next, we have a beautiful wool embroidery stitch to share with you. I am pleased to have as my guest today Esther Randall. Esther is author of the book Esther's Silk Ribbon Embroidery. Welcome to the program, Esther.
Thanks, Martha. Martha, today we're going to explore the wonderful stitch of buttonhole. Years ago, the buttonhole stitch was used so many times. All your buttonholes were made with this stitch. Blankets were bound with this stitch. It's a wonderful stitch to use in crazy patch. In fact, it's one of the most popular in the crazy patch. The buttonhole stitch is one that I always relate to the old-fashioned 7-minute frosting. If you make a mistake, if you need to cover up something, just put a little more frosting or another buttonhole stitch on it. All right, thread your needle and knot it. You're going to come down at this, almost on the square. Pull your thread. Now, you can make this stitch as large as you want, or you can make it as close as you want.
That looks like an easy stitch.
This is a wonderful stitch, and it's very easy. Now say you want to skip a large space and go down and make one long stitch so that in your embroidery work you could go back in and do bullion roses, lazy daisy flower, or a leaf. Then go back to the small stitches. And this is, you can just go in any direction, small or large. But you see how simple it is, always controlling your thread with your thumb. Here again, I like to use the smaller hook so that I have the control of my left hand in my work to lay that thread gently and get the value of the fluffy part of it. This is a project where we've used it on a blanket, and it is so simple to bind a baby blanket and give such a wonderful finish.
Esther, it looks like such an easy stitch to do, and you know I like easy stitches.
Well, it is. It is so versatile.
Esther, do you always, excuse me for interrupting, but do you always use wool fabric when you do wool embroidery?
Well, I think what we need to keep in mind, and especially when we're first starting to embroidery with a new medium, we need to keep in mind that the natural fibers are very complementary to each other. And so you can keep the feel and have it blend together if you use wool on wool, and that's why I do that. But then you can break off and go into other fabrics.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to share with you a home decorating idea I really think you'll love. I have two versions of a beautiful Australian window pane to show you. The first is ecru in white. As you can see, the laces are ecru, the embroidery is ecru, these are shadow applique bows on the side, and you remember we had an earlier show which taught you how to do shadow applique. But here is the Australian window pane segment right here in ecru on white. And here is another pillow, almost exactly the same, with the Australian window segment done with a green leaf, a pink bow, and then these lovely shadow applique bows are on each side. Here is how you make this pillow. First, trace off the design on the pillow front, the whole thing. This section right here where my fingers are will be the Australian window pane section. Take the Australian window pane section, put a piece of organdy on top of it. So you see the square piece of organdy, and zigzag around the outside of the Australian window pane section. Step number 1. Next step, after zigzagging the outside, trim away the excess organdy. Remember this big hunk of organdy we had on the front? Just trim the whole thing away so the front is nice and clean. Then I'm going to flip it to the back, and I will trim away the inside of this leaf and flower combination, so when I turn it back, it will be see-through. You see, you can see my fingers through that. Okay, that was step number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then the last step is the final step. I put stabilizer behind it, tearaway stabilizer, come back in and do a beautiful, heavier zigzag, an applique in other words, all the way around the outside and on the inside too. Next, we have a lovely craft for you, a Cameo picture book cover. This is the perfect hot glue gun project to make for everybody on your gift list, and please make one for yourself. The Cameo Swiss motif and lace trims are simply glued on, and the inside is absolutely lovely. Let me move this out of the way and show you how simple it is to make this photo album. Take a notebook like you use for school, wrap fabric around the outside, simply take a knife and shove it up underneath the hookers here, and then move it around, fold your mitered points, fold it all down and glue it. Now what you do to make this pretty is simply take a piece of poster board, cover the poster board on the back with fabric, turn it over, slip it underneath your rings there, and glue it down. And that makes it all pretty on the inside. Then I have a motif, a Swiss motif. Actually on the one I showed you first, I dyed it ecru. Put the motif down, shape your lace around the outside of the Swiss motif, and then hot glue gun that down too, and then take lace, miter the corners, and glue it all the way around the album. Simple, isn't it? I love to collect antique clothes, and I'd like to invite you to come into my attic and see what special treasures I have to share with you today. Coming up into my attic is one of my very favorite things to do. Now, we don't really have exactly Australian window pane and antique clothing, but I have some pieces which I think would interpret beautifully with our sewing machine techniques you've had on the show today. This particular blouse is absolutely lovely. All of this work is handwork, hand embroidery, hand-drawn work. Can you see how it is peekaboo, although the work is all done by hand? I think this could be very beautifully interpreted in Australian window pane done on the machine. This wonderful little spring coat for an infant or little girl is made of organdy. Look at the little peekaboo motifs with lace filled in here. Then over on the sleeve, let me hold it out so you can see, is another little peekaboo motif with lace on it. Then let me turn it to the back. Talk about something pretty. Lace motifs, looks like Australian window pane up here. Then the same lace motifs travel down the back of this lovely little coat. And I believe that would be a nice interpretation for Australian window pane. Where I got the idea for shadow diamonds in the first place was when I purchased this skirt at an antique store in Huntsville. Let me go down to the bottom of this skirt, which has lovely 1-inch tucks all over it. Can you see the shadow diamonds on the bottom of the skirt? This is actually a shadow diamond hem. It's a very full skirt, and the tucks travel all the way down the skirt, and then when it's turned up, there's this beautiful shadow diamond hem. I think this would be lovely on a child's dress or on a lady's dress. And actually, let me show you this skirt one more time, the whole skirt. If you can get the look of how beautiful these tucks are. There are 1-inch tucks which travel almost from the top of the skirt all the way down to the bottom of the skirt. I think that's very pretty. For our Sewing from the Heart idea for today, I would like to share with you that a number of our friends around the country and actually around the world are finding that they really do have a place as a volunteer teacher at the senior citizens centers around the country. We find an excellent educational program exists certainly in our Senior Citizens Center here in Huntsville, and I think that you would find the ladies really appreciating lessons. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you can come back with us next time.